Hello and welcome to the 15th episode of PEM Podcast, the Psychic Eye Mystery Podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Laurie.
You're a hopeful host.
With my schmabulous sister, Sunday.
Okay, enough of that bullshit.
Oh God, I love my sister. I love her. You're my favorite sister.
I'm glad because you only have one. It's like, that's the dumbest joke ever. Oh, I'm 3. Oh, I fell for it.
It's kind of it's on par with like a dad joke, right? It's
I would hope. Yeah.
Kind of.
I got your
nose. Don't know. Essentially, people don't know right off the bat that we're the only sibling sisters in our family
that are talking to each other.
Could be.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah, we are. We're the only 2 siblings talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been like that for 20 years, folks. For 20 years
or longer.
I'm
looking at this desk that is littered with coffee stains from my son who's home. So he's not every time I clean, he comes in and becomes Messy Marvin. It's futile.
It's his duty as a a young man in his 20s. It's his duty,
please,
to be the walking pig pen.
There's the Walking Dead and then the Walking Pig pen.
So. Yeah, it doesn't make me love them any less though. I love your sons, my nephews. They're so cool. They really are. They're cool kids. Very cool kids. You raise good, cool kids. I like to think that it's like my influence, the cool aunt.
It is
influence.
It's all you.
Kind of rubbed off.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
All you. Yes. I had nothing to do.
Finally, I get the credit I deserve. It's recorded. You have it.
All right. Listen,
cemented
we have
there.
We have a very long story to deal with today. So let us jump into.
This is a tough one, guys. So brace yourselves. It's a tough one. Yeah, I don't know if it's for me, it wasn't as tough as Aisha, but it is tough. It's a hard one. And many people might find it on par, if not even just a tiny bit worse. So it's similar to the Bricker family murders, very similar to the Bricker family murders. But we'll get to that. We'll get to murder in a moment. I have a fantastic anecdote to tell. I've been like busting at the seams. So excited to record this because it was the coolest reading I think I've had so far. So I was reading for a woman, first-time client, and older gentleman comes in from the other side right away. Boom. And he came in from pretty high. So again, for those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, when a medium gets someone from the other side to quote unquote come in, it just means like you can feel their presence, so to speak. And it's almost like you are sharing space in a big room with another soul. So it's kind of like if I was sitting in a chair in a big, huge lobby that was mostly white, a door would open and someone would come in. So anyway, so this older gentleman comes in and I told my client, I said, I think this is your grandfather. And I believe he's on your mom's side. And he keeps showing me that he's working on a watch. And he was showing me like the delicate gears and that he was manipulating the delicate gears. And it turns out her great-grandfather, not her grandfather, but her great-grandfather had a hobby of collecting watches and working on them. So I thought that was like, boom, great hit, right? And then this gentleman takes me to World War II. And I'm seeing like the scene through his eyes and feeling his emotions. So I know immediately I'm in the Czech Republic. I know I'm in Czechoslovakia. Well, the former Czechoslovakia, is it the Czech Republic now? I can't tell. I don't know. Czechoslovakia. He's in Czechoslovakia, World War II. He's in a trench, scared out of his mind. And I can feel like the enemy is closing in. So I said, did he barely escape World War II? Because he's making me feel like he's in a ditch hiding. And she goes, oh my God, yes. He was conscripted into the army and the Germans had shot, Germans or Russia, can't remember, had shot all of his comrades. They were all dead.
German.
Okay. They were all dead. lying dead around him, and he had to pretend to be dead while the Germans were kind of walking up and down the trench, looking for anybody that moved. So they finally left, and he waited there a considerably longer time and then fled, and barely made it out of the country alive. So I, had posed this to her, and she was like, "That's exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened." And this was the lore from their family. So the fact that, like, I don't know, it was really, really amazing to be taken to that moment and feel what he felt and see what he saw, but yet I wasn't scared. I could feel his fear, but I personally was not scared. It was almost like, I don't know, someone next to you is terrified, and you're like, it's okay, it'll be okay.
Or maybe even
kind of a
watching
thing.
like a scary movie or something, right? Like you're finding yourself kind of being a part of it, but you're not really in it.
Yeah, well, I'm scared of scary movies.
Great analogy, Sandy. Move
I
on.
know. I'm like, no, it's not like that at all,
Not at all.
Sandy. I'm afraid of fucking Casper. Okay. Like, no, thank you. So yeah. But it was just really interesting because I could feel the damp. I could feel it was raining, drizzling, and I could feel that. I could smell the earth. I could feel the wetness of the dirt and how cold he was. He was cold, and shivering both from fear and from cold. And to just lie there motionless, not, and hold his breath for, well, he didn't hold his breath for hours, but to lie there for hours until nightfall, until he could scramble out of the ditch and run for it. And then I felt, even when he did get out of the ditch and ran for it, he was still in danger for many days until he made it out of the area, out of the country. Barely made it out of the country, and then he made his way here, to the States. And it's just fascinating how, violence can find you, right? Sometimes it finds you and you're done, and sometimes it doesn't, and you live to see another day. And sometimes it's really, really close. It's a close call. So I thought that was just an amazing, amazing session. I thought it was cool. And then he came, he had a lot of information, had been watching his great granddaughter, and like the whole family, been watching over the whole family, for all the time that he was on the other side. And I see that a lot. I see a lot of older family members kind of watching over us and just kind of checking in, making sure we're okay, maybe trying to influence our minds in a certain direction, because there'll be an opportunity for growth and to overcome. And sometimes, mentioning to someone else, hey, yeah, you want to go into business with this person. You definitely want to go into business with this person, something like that.
Let me just put it out there. Hello to my grandparents, please.
And sometimes they whisper in the ear of prospective book buyers, buy that one, get that Abby Cooper book. That sounds really good. Nice segue, right? Oh, good segue. Okay, book promotion time. A Panic Premonition. This was, I think, last in the actual traditionally published. So this was 15. And then I'm now self-publishing because I like the money. So A Panic Premonition. And what's interesting is, because you don't have really say on the cover, but you can influence it. So they always ask you, what would you like to see on the cover? And I would always tell them specifically with photos. And the outfit that Abby is wearing in A Panic Premonition is an outfit that I actually had.
It looks like something you would wear.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It does.
Yeah. I had that top, the white top, the black pants, the black boots. So it was, I kind of liked seeing it on the cover. So in this installment of the Abby Cooper Psychic Eye series, in line with, how violence can find you and sometimes it finds your family. In this edition, Abby, Abby's husband, who is an FBI agent, but he also freelances with a construction company to build panic rooms. And one morning, the head of construction, their very good friend Dave, goes missing. And then it's discovered that married couple is gunned down in their panic room. And all signs point to Dave, the partner. So Abby has to kind of get it in gear and hunt down Dave and hunt down the killer. And there's a lot of twists and turns, and it's edge of your seat kind of stuff. So check it out. Books are sold. A Panic Premonition, 15th edition in the Psychic Eye Mystery series. Okay. Then now we're on to Sandy's portion. It's funny because I feel like I talk a lot, but then you have the longest.
Yes, you do. You talk a lot.
But I'm entertained.
I just wait, and then eventually I get to say something.
I love how you wait. Yeah, but like interrupt with a jab, interrupt with a jab, interrupt with a jab.
I'm adding color.
Whatever, sister. Whatever.
Okay. All right, fine.
So this is the Walker family murders. This took place in
1959.
1959. Yeah. And it's violence doesn't change, like murder is murder is murder is murder is murder, which is kind of interesting because this is definitely a story that could happen today, honestly. Absolutely. Unfortunately.
I'd hope not.
Yeah, I know. So Sands, go ahead, take it away.
Okay. All right. So as we experienced during the PEM podcast of the Bricka family murders, we know that the cold-blooded killing of an entire family can shake anyone that hears about the story and the surrounding community to its very core. And so today we're going to review the execution of another young family, the Walkers, who were brutally murdered in their Osprey, Florida home on December 20th, 1959. And like the Bricka family, this horrific case is still officially unsolved. So Clifford Walker was born on October 16th, 1934, the oldest son of 5 children to his parents, Clifford Sr. and Dorothy Walker. He grew up in Arcadia and met Christine, born Evelyn Christine Myers, in high school. Born November 18th, 1935, Tilly, as she was known to her family, and her younger sister Novella were raised by their mother, Ruby, after Tilly's father left home when the girls were young. Tilly's superior twirling skills cast her as the lead drum majorette in the Arcata High School marching band. And Tilly's brown hair, which was a little curly, long legs, feminine figure, and sweet nature attracted men everywhere she went, but she only had eyes for Cliff. The two grew close following graduation while working at the local rodeo where Tilly twirled rope and Cliff roped calves. The sweethearts married in 1955 when Cliff was 20 years old and Tilly was 19. The couple made their home in Osprey in a sparsely furnished white wood-framed house at the end of a shell road on the 14,000-acre Potter Palmer Ranch, where Cliff worked as a ranch hand. Their son James was born on August 24th, 1956, and daughter Deborah came along on January 11th, 1958. While Cliff's $55 a week salary covered little beyond the basics, Tilly really appreciated her husband and her happy home and proudly displayed their framed marriage certificate on the living room wall. The Walkers made the most of the sunny Florida weather and spent their free time on Sarasota beaches and visiting with area family and friends. Sadly, the Walkers' somewhat idyllic life turned nightmarish late on the afternoon of December 19th, 1959, the details of which are very, very graphic. With only 1 week before Christmas, Saturday the 19th started out as a busy day for the young family. There was a newly cut tree on the porch, which had to be brought inside and decorated, and plans to travel to Arcadia to visit family needed to be finalized. But all of that would have to wait. Instead, there were errands to run, and for the shopping trip that day, Tilly chose a red and white print dress and high heels and dressed 23-month-old Debbie in a blue plaid dress. And not to be outdone, 3-year-old Jimmy proudly wore his green cowboy hat for the day's outing. Cliff wanted to trade in the family car, a 1952 Plymouth, for a later model, so their plans included a visit to a local car dealer to check out what was available. However, their first stop was at the IJ for groceries, and then the family drove to Altman Chevrolet in Sarasota to test drive a Hudson Jet and look over a green and white Chevy sedan. After leaving the car lot, they purchased candy, cookies, and drinks for the children and a carton of Kools for Cliff at Johnny's Hardware. Once their shopping was done, Tilly and Cliff visited Dan and Lucy McLeod, who resided on the opposite side of the Potter Palmer Ranch from the Walkers. Dan and Cliff worked together as fellow ranch hands, and despite their slight age difference, the two were very good friends. The men took their guns out and went for a short hunting trip and then loaded Cliff's Jeep with cattle feed for him to take to his house. Anxious to get their groceries home, Tilly drove off in the family's Plymouth, as Cliff told her, "I'll be right on." He headed home a half hour later in his Jeep with their 2 children. The next morning, on Sunday, December 20th, Dan rose before sun, hooked up the horse trailer to his small right truck, and backed his horse inside and headed to the walkers because the two men had made plans to go hog hunting on horseback. Cliff was an early riser, and even though it was only 5:30, Daniel expected to smell coffee brewing as he approached the house. But instead, the house was totally dark. Believing that Cliff had overslept, Dan knocked loudly on the door, intending to wake his friend up from his slumber. But when there was no answer, Dan started to look around the property and saw that both Cliff's Jeep and the family Plymouth were parked in the yard, although Tilly had parked her car in an unusual space. Dan also noticed that the cut Christmas tree and some holiday gifts on the porch floor, which he also found a little strange. And after trying the locked front door, he went around to the back screen door and found that latched as well. Concerned, he peered through the windows and was able to discern a single dim light. Someone was in the house. So why wasn't anyone answering his knocks? Realizing something was wrong, Dan used his pocket knife to slit a hole in the screen door and unlatch it. As he entered the kitchen, he switched on the fluorescent light and saw Tilly's bare feet and her dress pulled up around her waist. Unprepared by what he saw, Dan slowly realized that Tilly was lying on the floor in the doorway of the living room in a pool of blood from a gunshot wound to the head. Just beyond Tilly, he then saw Cliff on his back, still wearing his cowboy hat, blood trickling from his right eye, and little Jimmy, also with a gunshot wound to the head, was curled up next to his father on the floor. Debbie appeared to be missing from the grisly scene. Absolutely panicked, Dan stumbled out of the house and ran to call the police. But instead of driving his truck, which was hooked up with a horse trailer, he climbed into Cliff's Jeep so he could travel faster to get help. The .22 caliber rifle that Cliff had used the day before while hunting was still in the cab, and the cattle feed that Dan had helped Cliff to load remained in the back. Dan sped off to the IGA where there was a payphone, and after securing a dime from a stranger, he called the Sarasota police, who in turn contacted the county sheriff. Police from several counties, including DeSoto County and Lee County and the Florida Sheriff Bureau, swarmed the property, with bloodhounds and fingerprint and ballistic experts in tow. Lacking a decent camera, the Sarasota police asked a local news reporter to take the crime scene photos. Upon arrival, authorities working the scene pieced together their theory about what took place in the home that led to the assassination of this young family. They ascertained that Tilly likely arrived home from the McLeods at about 4:05 p.m. Investigators believe that the likely reason the family car was parked in a different location is that somebody else had parked in the family spot, and that Tilly knew the occupant of the vehicle and let that person into her home. Evidence suggested that Tilly wasn't attacked right away, and instead she was able to hang up her purse in the kitchen, place a Christmas card from the McLeods on top of the fridge, and store the groceries before she was assaulted. Police theorized that the perpetrator was a man who fancied Tilly and likely made a pass at her, which she resisted. The situation quickly turned ugly when her assailant punched her in the face, and although she was badly beaten, Tilly fought viciously against her attacker. She used her high-heeled shoes as a defense weapon, which were found stained with blood in separate locations, one in the house and the other on the front porch, indicating that she had made it out of the house before being bagged inside. Her assailant then forcibly took Tilly into Jimmy's room and raped her before shooting her with a .22 caliber firearm. Due to her intense struggle, the first bullet grazed Tilly, but the second bullet was fatally fired into the top of her skull. The killer then put a quilt over the bloodstained pillow on Jimmy's bed and used another quilt to wipe the blood from Tilly's legs before dragging her across the floor toward the living room. Not long afterward, Cliff returned home with Jimmy and Debbie. Upon entry, Cliff was ambushed and shot in the face between the bridge of his nose and the corner of his right eye. Jimmy was shot 3 times. Following the first shot, the mortally wounded young boy crawled to his dead father, seeking his protection. The killer then fired 2 more bullets, ending the life of his young victim. He then fired on Debbie, but somehow she survived her bullet wound, and out of ammunition, the killer took the baby to the bathroom and drowned her in the bathtub. Debbie's cause of death, whether from a bullet wound or drowning, has never been ascertained. With no immediate clues as to who had murdered the young family, investigators recovered a significant amount of physical evidence left at the scene by the perpetrator that included a bloody cowboy boot, a cellophane strip from a cool cigarette wrapper, a white grease-stained t-shirt, and a print on the bathtub faucet handle. Authorities also recovered a dark-colored hair strand in the bathroom and a long blonde hair inside Tilly's dress. With the help of family members, detectives discovered that some key items were missing from the home. That included Cliff's pocket knife, a fresh carton of cool cigarettes, a few dollars, and oddly, Tilly's royal blue high school majorette uniform, which had been stowed in a cedar chest in her bedroom, and the couple's framed marriage license had been removed from the living room wall. However, the children's wrapped Christmas gifts remained in the house and nothing else of value was taken. The missing personal items, coupled with the fact that Tilly had been assaulted before being murdered, led investigators to theorize that not only did the Walkers know their assailant, but perhaps the killer had been in love with Tilly and sought revenge against the young couple. The different hair samples collected at the scene also indicated that perhaps the Walkers had been attacked by more than one assassin. On Christmas Eve, the Walker family was laid to rest together in an Arcadia cemetery. And just a few months after the massacre, bloody clothing from the Walker home was discovered in a shed not far away from their residence. The items included 2 t-shirts, a skirt, a blouse, pants, and a handkerchief that belonged to both Cliff and Tilly and were all blood-soaked. Police theorized that the clothing had been grabbed from the couple's bedroom and used to wipe the blood off the killer or killers, and then stored in a place only someone familiar with the area would know about. The notion that the gruesome murders were committed by a local man were furthered by the fact that the killer had been purposeful in his efforts to murder 2 very young children. While toddlers would have been incapable of identifying a stranger, they likely could have revealed the identity of someone familiar. As such, police initially focused on local area suspects that included Dan McLeod, Mike Cutter, Butch Dennison, Stanley Mock, Curtis McCall, Wilbur Tooker, and relatives Albert Walker and Ozzie Humans. Dan McLeod, who discovered the massacred family, passed a polygraph and was quickly eliminated as a suspect. Police also considered Mike Cutter a peculiar individual who carried with him a .22 caliber pistol and a picture of Tilly. Investigators had planned to have an undercover deputy buddy up with Cutter, but with no information about the outcome of their efforts exists. A woman told a sheriff's deputy that Butch Dennison, who lived near the shed where the Walkers' bloody clothing was discovered, talked about killing the Walkers. She further claimed that Butch's father covered for his son by burying Butch's bloodied cowboy boots. And acting on this tip, only the elder Dennison was questioned by police, who subsequently passed a polygraph. Local meter reader Stanley Mock captured the attention of police largely because the Walker family home was on his route, and he enjoyed seeing the Walker children when they played outside. Upon learning about the murders, the seemingly devastated worker suffered a complete mental health breakdown for which he received electroshock therapy. Detectives never found any evidence linking Mock to the crime, and he passed away in 1997 of brain cancer at the age of 63. Following the massacre, rumors began to circulate that Tilly may have been cheating on Cliff with a former high school boyfriend, 21-year-old Curtis McCall. McCall was a local troublemaker with a history of violence and happened to own a .22 caliber gun. Shortly after the murders, Curtis was a man on edge, nervous and unable to eat, and was fired from his job as a Florida Highway Patrol dispatcher for dereliction of duty. When questioned by police in 1960 at the Sumter County Courthouse in Americus, Georgia, Curtis denied having a romantic interest in Tilly, but he did say that he had seen both her and Cliff a few weeks before the murders because the couple had come to ask him about a horse. He also claimed that he had sold his 9-shot .22 caliber gun to somebody whose name he couldn't remember. After being questioned, Curtis underwent 3 separate polygraph tests, but because he was so nervous during each inquisition, his tests were all inconclusive. However, the tests did reveal that it was highly likely that Curtis was lying, and when asked if he had withheld information about the murders. To police, 65-year-old retired railroad worker Wilbur Tooker, a local pervert who had sexually harassed Tilly on multiple occasions, seemed to be the most likely suspect. Tooker lived a mile southwest from the Walker home, and the Walkers' closest neighbor. He'd often pay Tilly an unwelcome visit. Her mom, Ruby, told investigators that Tilly dreaded Tooker and was afraid of him, and her sister Vella claimed that Tilly told her that the only way to get Tooker to leave her alone was with a bullet. A half a dozen of the Walkers' friends and family members recounted to investigators how Tooker had, on more than one occasion, manhandled Tilly, tried to kiss her and get her into bed. And when she'd finally had enough of the abuse from Tooker, Tilly told her husband about what had been going on. Enraged, Cliff wanted to kill Tooker, but a friend talked him out of it, and instead Cliff gave Tooker a stern warning to not come by their house anymore. Despite the warning from Cliff, Tooker continued to be infatuated with Tilly and constantly talked about her to his friend William Holmesmer. After the murders, police retraced Tooker's steps from that fateful Friday the 19th afternoon. They discovered that he'd eaten dinner between 5 and 7 p.m. in Sarasota with a friend who was a retired dentist. And after dinner, Tooker arrived at the Bradenton High School no later than 7:45 and played the violin with the West Coast Symphony Orchestra. Investigators could not ascertain from the orchestra concert master if Tooker seemed troubled or acted oddly, as Tooker was generally a really poor performer, and it was impossible to discern one bad performance from another. Despite these two accounts of Tooker's whereabouts, he did not have an alibi between 4 and 5 p.m. when the Walkers were gunned down in their home. He died in 1963 at a Veterans Memorial Hospital in Bradenton. Police also considered Cliff's cousin, Albert Walker, who was known by locals to be a boisterous drunk and, when sober, showed signs of mental illness. In addition to their blood relationship, Albert considered Cliff a very close friend. He had lived with the Walkers for a few months after leaving the military in 1958 and frequently spent time at their home during cookouts and family get-togethers. Albert's actions on December 20th were considered by investigators to be suspicious. Albert said he had come to Osprey from Wauchula to talk with Cliff about a Christmas party, but in fact, Cliff wasn't planning a party because the family was due to spend the holiday in Arcadia. Adding to their suspicion, Albert, upon arrival in Osprey and shortly after discovering from a town local that the Walkers had been murdered, he showed up at the murder scene and sobbed uncontrollably while leaning over the hood of Tilly's car with his head buried in his arms. 4 days later at the family funeral, Albert was still incapable of masking his grief. He wailed during the service and fainted twice, including when Tilly's casket passed him by. Some family members thought Albert's over-the-top behavior was fake, later telling investigators that their relative had put on a show during the funeral. In September 1962, investigators turned their attention to Albert, tracking him down in Ridgely, Tennessee, where he was employed as a migrant farm worker, to ask him to participate in a polygraph test, which he passed. Again in 1987, Albert underwent a second polygraph test at the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, at which point the lead investigator reported that Albert was not responsible for the Walker murders. However, it wasn't until 2006 that Albert Walker was fully eliminated as a suspect when it was determined that his DNA did not match the evidence preserved from the murder scene. One other family member was investigated, Cliff's brother-in-law, Ozzie Yeomans, who was married to Cliff's sister, Grace. Ozzie, having served 2 years for assault while attempted rape in 1931, reportedly had made sexual advances toward Tilly. However, Ozzie passed his polygraph and was cleared of suspicion. At one time or another, 587 people were considered suspects, and hundreds were interviewed and or given polygraphs. And everyone in town with a .22 caliber gun was asked to bring their weapon in for ballistics testing. But with no clear motive, the leads went nowhere and the case went cold. The Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, undermanned and underfunded at the time, was widely criticized for their mishandling of the crime scene. Some of the deputies arriving on the murder scene had pulled their cars up close to the property and destroyed tire tread evidence. Another officer walked in a pool of blood, leaving a print that for years caused investigators to incorrectly believe that the killer wore cowboy boots. And the print taken from the bathroom was a palm print, making that evidence useless toward identifying the murderer. Based upon circumstantial evidence, investigators clung to the belief that whoever committed these atrocities was a local, and yet their trust in polygraph tests, which were widely used throughout the investigation, did not result in any arrests. Then in 1962, 3 years after the Walker family had been laid to rest, a serial killer named Emmett Monroe Spencer claimed responsibility. But Spencer was a known pathological liar, and his claims were soon dismissed as a false confession by the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office and Sheriff Ross Boyer. In 2005, the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office took a fresh look at the case and for the first time obtained DNA samples from Tilly's clothing. The Sheriff's Office also announced that they were seeking further information from a female bartender from Stroudsburg who had contacted authorities on August 5th, 1994. She reported that one of her regular customers confessed to her on August 4th, 1994, that he in fact had killed the family in Osprey, Florida many years ago when he was a young man. She said that she had been talking to the man when he started crying, and when she asked him why he was crying, he told her about the murders. The bartender told police the man was white and in his 60s, and she believed he was retired and had worked odd jobs in the Stroudsburg area. She hung up without identifying herself, but said she would call back with more information. Unfortunately, she never did. In 2012, the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office began investigating possible links between the Walker family murders and Perry Smith and Richard Dick Hickok, who had been convicted and executed for the 1959 murders of the Clutter family in Holcomb, Kansas. The Clutter murders were the topic of Truman Capote's 1965 best-selling true book, In Cold Blood. Smith and Hickok were suspects in the Walker murders as early as 1960, largely due to circumstantial evidence. 34 days before the Walker murders, Smith and Hickok fled to Florida in a stolen car and were spotted at least a dozen times between Tallahassee and Miami. The pair checked into a Miami Beach motel about 4 hours from Osprey and checked out the morning of the Walker murders. At some point on December 19th, Smith and Hickok bought items at a Sarasota department store just a few miles from the Walker home. And according to sheriff's records, the Walkers had considered buying a 1956 Chevrolet Bel Air, the same kind of vehicle that Smith and Hickok were driving through Florida. Authorities theorized that Smith and Hickok may have gained entry into the Walker home on the pretense of selling them their stolen car. While both the Clutters and the Walker family murders involved a home invasion and executions by a firearm, the similarities between the two cases end there. The Clutters were deliberately targeted in the false belief that there was significant cash on the property, and this motive was not evident in the Walker family case. Equally, Smith had prevented Hickok from carrying out a rape at the Clutter farm, whereas Tilly was brutally assaulted before her execution. A blonde hair was found on Tilly's dress, and neither Smith nor Hickok was blonde-headed. At the Clutter home, Smith and Hickok took cash and valuables that were easy to carry and pawn, and at the Walkers, only personal items related to Tilly were taken, namely her high school majorette uniform and the couple's marriage license. All of which suggests that unlike that of the Clutters, the Walker murders were not the result of a robbery or home invasion, but because they were specifically targeted, likely by someone that personally knew at least one of the members of the Walker family. Smith and Hickok were arrested in Las Vegas, Nevada on December 30th, 1959 for the Clutter murders. Both provided an alibi regarding their whereabouts at the time of the Walker murders, and both also passed a polygraph test. Following their conviction in the murder of the Clutter family, the pair were executed by hanging on April 14th, 1965. In December 2012, Sarasota County investigators announced that they were seeking an order to exhume Smith and Hickok's bodies from Mount Muncie Cemetery in hopes that mitochondrial DNA extracted from their bones could be matched to the semen found at the Walker home. In August 2013, the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office announced that they were unable to find a match between the DNA of either Perry Smith or Richard Hickok with the samples in the Walker family murder. Only partial DNA could be retrieved, making the outcome one of uncertainty, neither proving nor disproving the involvement of Smith and Hickok. To this day, investigators consider Smith and Hickok the most viable suspects in the Walker family murders. After 60 plus years since their tragic murder, most of Cliff and Tilly's immediate family members have passed away. Whether their killer was a family member, someone who was infatuated with Tilly, or a stranger is still unknown. However, the nature of the killings was very personal, making the mystery behind who and why the Walkers were killed on December 19, 1959, an enduring mystery that has yet to be solved. Incidentally, the Walkers' missing marriage certificate, the one taken from the wall, did eventually turn up among items given to Cliff Walker's niece by a relative. My sources for this story include Wikipedia, The Walker Family Murders, Macabre Mondays, The Walker Family Murders, ArcadiaPublishing.com, Medium.com, Unsolved Mysteries, The Walker Family Murders by Michael East, February 21st, 2021, Garden City Telegram, March 30th, 1960, The Morning Call, Cold Case, Strasbourg Bartender May Hold Key to Unsolved Florida Murders by Tracy Jordan, March 18th, 2011, TheLineup.com, In Cold Blood, The Brutal 1959 Murder of the Walker Family by Orrin Gray, February 27th, 2017, Websleuths.com, The Walker Murder Suspects, Richard, 12/22/05, Herald Tribune, Long Cold Trail in 1959 Murder Case Heats Up by Lenora Lapeter Anton, May 19, 2013, and What Lies Beyond.boards.net, December 19, 1959, The Walker Family Murders, author Graveyard Birdie, 12/2014. So
Have a glass
lots, I know, right? Lots of suspects.
Lots and lots of, the thing that is so kind of made my eyes widen was at one time or another, 587 people were considered suspects. So basically it was the whole town because they had no fucking clue. They just had no fucking clue who did it.
Well, when I was doing my research, I learned that because it was such a small community, people started pointing fingers at each other, relatives, that nobody was spared because everybody was very, very nervous about the brutality of the crime.
Right. Yeah. When you murder babies, that's a whole other level of just, I don't even know. There just aren't words, are not words. Yeah. The little boy who crawled to his dad, mortally wounded. And you had said at one point he was sucking on a lollipop, right?
I did.
Yeah. It just, oh my God, just get you in the feels, man. It's awful, 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 awful.
Well, the other aspect of this is the fact that in 1959 and 1960, early 60s, the police were very reliant on polygraph tests, which have been
Right.
proven over time to be very unreliable. So
Right.
they were
Right.
basing all of their theories on the fact that the polygraph test was so prominently used.
Right.
And then, it was one bad mistake after another in terms of the crime scene and in terms
Right.
of preserving evidentiary photography and DNA,
Right.
et cetera.
Right.
So I think
Right.
they've been scrambling to figure out what happened.
Yeah. The answer wasn't clear to me after I read this, but then I did an automatic writing and I was kind of surprised by what came through. And I'll explain that in a second. So I want to work backwards and talk about Albert Walker, who was the cousin.
Yes.
Right? His cousin.
Yes. Yep.
I believe he was truly grieving. I believe he was truly, truly grieving. I think it would have been one thing if had Tilly had been murdered or Tilly and Cliff had been murdered, but the whole family, I think, really undid him. Because I do believe after living with them, he was close to the kids and he was close to obviously his cousin and Tilly. I don't think he had any interest in her whatsoever. I think he just considered Cliff like a brother. So for me, he was quickly eliminated. Smith and Hickok, in cold blood guys. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. I did not get any link intuitively from them to this murder at all, at all. And the modus operandi was so different. Yeah, okay, they murdered one family, and this was a murder of another family, but everything else was really, really different. I don't think there were two attackers. I think there was only one. The blonde hair, Tilly's out with her husband and her children. They get dressed up to go into town and see people and be seen. She's hugging people, she's giving a hug to someone. So long blonde hair, that's a woman,
Yeah. In my research, I had read that she was very friendly with the IGA clerk that she interacted with as she checked out groceries. So
yeah,
could have been that.
I mean, when don't you pick up a hair? If you hug someone, boom, there it is.
Let me hold my dog for 5 minutes.
Exactly. Let me just pet the dog lightly.
Yeah.
And then a couple of other things. Yeah, the guy who confessed, pathological liar dude.
Yeah.
That rang totally false to me.
Okay.
Let's see. Daniel McLeod. Nope. He was the guy who discovered the bodies and was Clifford's really good friend. Mike Cutter, peculiar individual, carried a .22 pistol, had a picture of Tilly. I really didn't feel at all like he did it. He just, being strange doesn't make you a killer. So I discounted him as well. Butch Dennison. Oh, wait a minute. Who's the guy who would come around?
Wilbur Tucker.
Wilbur Tucker. Yeah. He didn't fit. He did in a way, but he didn't quite fit. She's afraid of this guy. She's not going to let him in his house. She's not going to turn her back to him to lay up, to put her purse up and put the groceries away. If she sees him in the driveway, she's turning around and going someplace else because Cliff has said he's going to murder him. He's going to kill him. So Tilly would be frantic to try and get to Cliff so that there wasn't a confrontation.
That makes sense. Plus, he was 65 years old at the time, and I can't imagine he being of that kind of strength to fight Tilly, who was 30 years his junior at this point.
With high heels,
with high heels,
yeah. Even with adrenaline, he probably was strong enough to overpower her, but not if she's fighting him. I really don't think that he could have done that if she was fighting him. So when I was doing the automatic writing, I'm just kind of letting my mind relax and inviting anybody on the other side who wants to come in and talk to me about these murders. And they came in and they basically were saying, let's see, that Lily was a bright light. Everybody loved her. And isn't it interesting how after she's brutally raped and murdered, it kind of becomes her fault? Like you and I were discussing the other day, how there's so much misogyny in the reporting of this murder.
Mhm.
Um, Even the way that she was described, what she was wearing, right? You had read that she was wearing a sheer red dress, right?
Right.
And it's a red dress, it's a dress, right? Why do you have to put sheer in there as if it's see-through, you know? And she was wearing high heels because she wanted to look good on the arm of her husband. This whole idea that she was having an affair, I don't buy that for a second, not for a second, not for a nanosecond. I think that she was madly in love with her husband. I think she loved her family. I doubt highly she would have gotten dressed up to go out and be seen with her husband, where he also gets dressed up and so do the kids, if she had, this idea that she wanted to be seen to hook up with someone else. I'm not buying it. It's just
Mhm.
it would be too much in Cliff's face, and there would have been more discussion amongst the people that were close to Cliff, right? They would have said,
Well, yeah. On top of that, she's framed their marriage certificate and made it a
right,
piece of art on the wall.
exactly.
And she had told her mom she was very happy with her
Yeah,
husband and her happy home and her happy life.
yeah.
It was not the means that she had hoped for. Her sister had married up
Hmm.
compared to her,
Hmm.
but she had a lot of security in Cliff. He was a really good husband, and she was a
Right.
very good wife to him. And they
Yep.
were young. They had a lot of potential ahead of them.
Right, exactly. When they were sort of naming who did it, I drew a C, and I'm like, no, that's Cliff. He didn't kill his wife, kill him, and kill the kids, right? And then the C came back again, and I had totally forgotten about Curtis. I had forgotten his name, and I got irritated and went back through and was like, is there anybody with a C? Oh my God, it's Curtis. So for me, Curtis was absolutely the clear ding ding winner of this, the clear perpetrator of this murder. What I believe happened is um, he probably went over for a visit, and found that Tilly came back to the house alone, and was trying to talk Tilly into leaving her husband to go back and become his girlfriend again. And the biggest clue, the kind of obvious clue, is the missing majorette uniform
Yeah.
that she wore in high school when
You
they
had to
were
be
boyfriend
looking for
girlfriend.
that. You
Yeah,
had to be looking for that in the
right,
house.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. That was his way of remembering when he and Tilly were a couple, right? And he took the framed photograph of, or excuse me, the framed marriage certificate off the wall because
Mhm.
that's an affront to his feelings for Tilly.
Mhm.
And I think that she, from my automatic writing, they said that she wasn't afraid with him to be alone with him because she had an affection for him. They had a relationship at one point, and she always saw him as, yes, troubled, but still someone that she cared about.
Mhm.
So when he turned on her, and he's got a 22, right? He's got a 22. He may have tried to be like, okay, pointing it at her, and you will, I'm going to subdue you. And she fought as if he didn't carry a weapon because she, I think, was convinced he wasn't going to, this was just another kind of wrestling match almost, right? And she could kind of fend him off, and that he wasn't going to shoot her, that he wouldn't really shoot her. And so when he did, um, and he grazed her temple, I think that she, like fought even harder, obviously, right? And he raped her as well. And so I believe that he raped her in Jimmy's bedroom, and she probably threatened to tell Cliff and to tell the whole town, and he panicked and tried to silence her. She fought again, and then he silenced her. And it's at that moment, from my automatic writing, that Cliff's car pulled into the driveway. So he has no escape route. He's too close to the scene. So he has to eliminate anybody coming through the door. So he was waiting for Cliff to come through the door. Cliff probably opened the door, bam, he's gone. And then the kids absolutely could identify him. So he had to deal with them as well. And I think that he had not necessarily a mental collapse at this moment, but I think he was a little out of body when he was doing this, just absolute panic fueling the whole thing
Mm.
because, the death penalty is real, right? And if you murder a family like this, well, you're going to the electric chair.
Well, even if you survive, like, the town coming
Right.
out, I mean,
Right.
good luck
Exactly.
getting to the trial,
Exactly.
in a town like this.
Exactly. And then I believe he was trying to arrange the scene as if the whole family was murdered together.
Mm.
So that's why he brought Tilly back into the kitchen and kind of propped her up and wiped the blood around. Like, I think he was just trying to clean the scene up a little bit. So the other thing that makes sense to me, and you had brought this up, that he was the police dispatcher. So he understands evidence and where it can lead. So he's trying to clean the scene up so that he's not leaving traces everywhere of who he is.
Mhm.
And when he's questioned later and he's nervous and he can't pass a polygraph and he's, just really undone, you had also said about the
Boys
police.
in blue, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
He was,
protect
they
him.
may have suspected him, but I don't know if they necessarily were interested in arresting anyone for this murder, truthfully.
Yeah. That didn't stand out as someone who could have done it, like really
Well,
had
everybody
clear
was
motive.
troubled. Like, if you think about it, all the suspects were troubled,
right?
right? One of them carries a picture of Tilly. Another one has a reputation for constantly manhandling her. The
Right.
cousin is off balance. Stanley
Right.
Mock, who's a freaking meter reader,
Yeah.
he's mentally unstable. So
Right.
the police kind of decided to promote this idea that whoever did it was mentally
deprived.
unstable to begin with,
Right.
because you can't be of right mind and commit
Right.
such a heinous crime.
Right.
So I think it drew a lot of suspicion around people that were mentally unstable.
Or even just
Ro-
odd,
yeah,
who weren't who didn't fit the nuclear family, golden boy, golden girl kind of image, right? So anybody who was just a little outside of that, right? And all of the suspects were also single, which I found interesting, right?
No, actually, Stanley was married. Stanley
Oh, was
Mock, the
he?
meter reader, was married. Yes.
Oh, okay. And okay, well, one. Okay,
One
everybody
of
else
them.
was like single.
Yeah.
So, to me, it was Curtis all the way. He did it. And then I thought it was kind of beautiful because on the other side, they always like to let you know that whoever crossed here is safe and sound over there. And so they let me know that Tilly and Cliff are still together. And they are planning to come back down, reincarnate, and have another life together, have another go at fulfilling the objectives that they had in their previous life in the 60s. And that the two babies had already reincarnated through. And I'm seeing this a lot in my readings too, where I will talk to family members who had, or I'll talk to a client who's had a family member pass away very young. So, really before the age of, up to about the age of 14. And I go looking for them and they aren't there. And the answer that I get is that, oh, they've recycled through, and they call it recycling, which I think is funny. Instead of like reincarnating, they've reincarnated back through. So the two children are already back here, and probably no memory at all, hopefully, of anything so heinous and terrible that happened to them. You hope that there's no past life memory that's been imprinted on them. And so
do you think that it was Curtis that was in that bar confessing to the bartender?
Yes, I do. I really do, because he fits not only the age, but the whole, how grieved he is, right? How grieved he is. And that was the other thing that they indicated. They indicated that Curtis died of something to do with the lungs. So you had reminded me, Sans, that he stole a pack of Luckies. Yeah.
Cool cigarettes.
Oh, cool. Sorry. Tomato.
Trying to get that brand promotion out there for somebody to sponsor us.
Yeah, I don't think we need to be promoted by a cigarette brand. I think we're okay on that one. So Curtis to me was the clear suspect, the clear guy that did it to me. Oh, and the last thing that they told me from the other side, they told me that this case is likely to be solved The DNA will be matched, I think, through someone, a relative of Curtis's,
Mhm.
who does the whole, what is it, 23andMe or whatever it is? Do you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
something like that. It's familial DNA that,
Right,
the massive
right,
pool of all of us.
right, right. At some point, that's going to happen, was my feeling. So,
Good. It'll be nice to have a closure on this case officially.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, they also said that, I don't know if Tilly's sister has crossed, but they said that they're together on the other side. So,
It would have been very recent because she was one of the last relatives,
Was she?
immediate relatives that was still alive.
we should research that and see if she's actually passed away. I'd
I
like to
think,
know.
um,
I don't know. I guess you look for an obituary, right?
I think the last time I had come across her as being alive and quoted was in 2013.
Okay.
I think that's right. So that would have been almost 10 years ago. So it's probably understandable that she might have likely passed away by this point.
Yeah. But you know me, I always like to trust but verify.
Well, you do the research on that.
Okay, I
I'm a
will.
little busy.
Oh, are you doing what? What are you doing? Oh, you're preparing for next week? Yeah,
Yes.
great case for next week. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the one that stumps me. And that might be one. That might
I
be
don't want this to stump you. I want an answer to this case
well
coming up.
honey, no one wants an answer more than me. Okay.
Okay.
But go
So-
ahead. Tell them what's
so
coming up next week.
Next week, we're going to talk about Jody Hosentrud, who was a newscaster in Mason City, Iowa. She did the morning news, and she was kidnapped, or disappeared, I should say, from her apartment building parking lot on June 7th, 1995. And there's been a massive police investigation. It's been both in the local and national news, and nobody knows what happened to her. There's been no evidence of any recovery whatsoever of Jody Hosentrud. And so we're not sure if this was a crime of opportunity or if she was targeted by perhaps an obsessed fan, or maybe it was somebody that she knew. So I'll be excited to hear your impressions of what happened to
Yeah, I'm
Jody.
looking forward to diving in. Just hope I can answer it. Okay, so that's it. Another pen podcast in the can. As always, guys, if you want to know more about me or schedule a reading with me, you can go to victorialaurie.com. We had some trouble with the website last week, so if you hopped on and weren't able to get in, don't sweat it. Go back to it. It's now working, functioning fine. Only took me an hour and a half on the phone with customer service, because we all have an hour and a half to just waste talking to someone who shouldn't be so difficult to deal with. You had one job.
Give her the shot.
Seriously. Oh my God, that was frustrating. But anyway, victorialaurie.com. Laurie is spelled LAURIE.com. If you want to know more about Sandy, good luck. She leaves no trace.
You know what? Now you're going to incentivize people to figure out who I am and what I'm about. I'm just her sister and a sidekick.
Nothing.
That's
There's
it.
Nothing. She doesn't post to social media. She just
Okay,
lives
enough.
a nice, quiet life.
Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week when we talk about Jody Hosentrud.
All right, guys. Take care. Thanks, Sans. Love you. Mean it.
Love you too.
Okay. Bye.